Julie, let me turn to you now, because obviously busy day on Capitol Hill with the president's brother on Capitol Hill answering questions by the impeachment inquiry committees. I mean, what do we know so far about this interview, which we should point out is still ongoing?
Yeah, it's still happening. It's been hours of this interview so far. It's happening also behind closed doors. So there's not much we can glean of it until members come out, until James Biden comes out himself. We'll see if he wants to talk to the press. You certainly tried to get him to talk coming into that interview, and he told you, Ryan, that he plans to tell the committee the truth. But you did also get your hands on the opening statement from James Biden. He pointed out in this statement that he has had a 50-year career, and none of it has ever touched the president, which is his brother, Joe Biden, that he had a lot of business ventures, that he separated his personal life from his professional life and never told his brother, Joe Biden, about it. So certainly the committee, Republicans especially, are going to try to make that point. They've tried to establish this link that somehow these business ventures, not only from James Biden, but also from the president's son, Hunter, had anything to do with the president, that he profited on this. James Biden poking a hole in that, and we'll see what happens when it wraps up.
And of course, Jim Jordan, as he went into the hearing today, actually admitted that, a big part of what they're investigating here was that period of time after Joe Biden left the vice president's office and before he was elected president. Doesn't that in a certain way undermine the whole premise of the impeachment, that he was using his influence as a public official to benefit his son or benefit himself? It's
a great question, and it's not the first time Jim Jordan made that kind of comment. Republicans have been very clear that they're looking into Joe Biden's time as vice president, as time as senator as well, and how he profited allegedly, or didn't profit, off of his name, essentially. And so you have a case where, of course, Republicans are still moving forward with the impeachment regardless of that fact. But I do want to point out that former President Trump, in his second impeachment trial before the Senate, a big reason why Senate Republicans did not vote to convict Trump in that case is because they said that the actions that he may or may not have done on January 6th was after his time as president. You already had Senator Mark Wayne Mullen, for example, last month say that argument, that if they send this over and the House ultimately votes on this, it's going to be a really, really high bar for them to convict the president when all these actions, to your point, happened before he was president. Right.
So speaking of potentially undermining the impeachment inquiry, Ryan, we had an interesting revelation yesterday in a Las Vegas courtroom. The special counsel, David Weiss, obviously pushing for an indictment of Alexander Smirnov, who's a former FBI informant. We believe he is the root of this FBI tip sheet, which Republicans are the ones that have described this. This isn't me describing it, have described it as one of the major pieces of evidence that led them to launch the impeachment inquiry. And now the special counsel is asking that they reconsider the release of Alexander Smirnov. What's the likelihood that the judge will grant this request?
Yeah, these allegations really were at the heart of this impeachment inquiry, and that's from Jim Jordan himself saying that directly. In this case, essentially, this is what happened essentially in a lot of the same January 6 cases, where someone gets arrested in one federal district and then ultimately the case is heard in a different one. So what they're doing here is saying this initial decision by the federal magistrate judge in Las Vegas, rather, should be looked at by the judge who will ultimately oversee this case when it's prosecuted in California. So basically they're going from the federal magistrate judge to an actual federal judge here and saying that, there's a lot of reasons that he should be held pre-trial. He's already been released, so he's had a little bit of, freedom and potential to communicate at this point already. But they say that he really needs to be held behind bars because there's a threat that he's going to continue to spread misinformation about one of the presidential candidates, i.e. Joe Biden, and that could be something that was derived from these Russian intelligence contacts that he had.
And maybe expand on that a little bit, because I think that came as a surprise to many of us. We knew, well, the indictment initially was a surprise, but then the surprise that he was actually could be working with Russian intelligence officials. Is that perhaps the biggest takeaway from this arraignment yesterday?
It was. That's what really surprised me yesterday. It was just how recently some of these contacts were, because what we knew before is this was someone who was trusted as of, middle of 2020, right? This is a long while ago, almost 4 years ago that at that point we knew he was trusted. But what this shows is that he was recently dealing with his FBI handler and had these planned trips overseas, and was going to meet with other Russian, or I guess foreign intelligence counterparts, and could get more information there. So he's been used very recently by the FBI, and I think that raises a lot of questions for the FBI overall about how they've been vetting a lot of the information that is coming from these sources and why they continue to use this individual when those tips that he initially gave back in 2020 were pretty suspicious.
Yeah, and it's something that Republicans were bringing up today. But it doesn't seem, though, Julie, that despite this credibility kind of being blown out on this particular witness that they've based a lot of the primacy of this impeachment inquiry, it doesn't appear that they're slowing down that process at all, despite Democrats saying that this should mean the end of the impeachment inquiry.
Yeah, no, they're not. And Jim Jordan basically said as much today. He said that this does not fundamentally change the course that Republicans are pursuing, the facts that they're trying to find here. And you're right, he was the star witness. He was the whistleblower that they based their entire inquiry on. But so far, Republicans are kind of finding new things to latch onto. They talked about, for example, that special counsel report that came out against the president. They're going to keep finding other ways to push this forward. And I should note, after they talked to James Biden today, they're going to hear from Hunter Biden behind closed doors next week. So certainly, despite Democrats, despite Jamie Raskin saying this blows a hole in their entire case for impeaching the president, which they said that this whole time, that they are still pursuing this, and they're going to keep doing these interviews and trying to find what sticks.
I think one of the things I was struck by, Ryan, was the timeline of all this. And it seems as though the judge is concerned about that as well. I mean, what's the source of his scrutiny in relation to discovering this alleged lying by this source and the way the prosecutors have handled it?
You know, if you go back to when this was being handled at the time, remember, at the time that they looked at this, that this tip came in, guess who was in charge of the Justice Department? The Trump administration, right? This was something that was assigned to a U.S. attorney out of Pennsylvania, Scott Brady, who was looking at this very directly. And, you know, Bill Barr had recommended that he investigate this. They looked at it, and they didn't end up really doing a deep inquiry into this. And I think that was probably the pivot point where you have to say, okay, well, if they knew this wasn't true, if they knew these were false allegations, if they couldn't verify this confidential human sources travel, why didn't that raise more suspicions going forward? Why was he still used? But, you know, big picture, I think when you're talking to average voters, one thing that sometimes just gets lost in this is that we know where Joe Biden's money came from after he was president. We know how he purchased that shore house. He's released all of his tax records, right? So it's like, if someone asks you, where'd all this money come from? Well, he had a pretty sweet book deal, right? So that all sort of, I think, is just big picture, something to remind people of, like, we know the source of this money. He got a good book deal. Jill wrote a book, too.
Right. Okay, Ryan Reilly, Julie Tsirkin, thank you both for being here. We appreciate it.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.